This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
China's crude oil imports in April fell 0.2% from a year earlier as refiners curbed production to relieve a squeeze in profit margins brought about by rising crude oil prices and bulging inventories. The world's biggest crude oil buyer brought in 40.36 million tons of crude oil in April, or 9.82 million barrels per day. Data from the General Administration of Customs showed on Friday. That was the lowest since December and was down from 11.69 million barrels of oil per day of imports in March. As crude oil prices hovered above $60 a barrel, versus historic lows a year earlier, refiners, in particular small, independent plants, faced shrinking margins as overall fuel supplies swelled due to increased operations at larger, more efficient private refiners.
Top U.S. fuel pipeline operator Colonial Pipeline shut its entire network, the source of nearly half of the U.S. East Coast's fuel supply, after a cyber attack on Friday that involved ransomware. The incident is one of the most disruptive digital ransom operations ever reported and has drawn attention to how vulnerable U.S. energy infrastructure is to hackers. A prolonged shutdown of the line would cause prices to spike at gasoline pumps ahead of peak summer driving season, a potential blow to U.S. consumers and the economy. This is as close as you can get to the jugular of infrastructure in the United States, said Amy Myers-Yaffa, research professor and managing director of the Climate Policy Lab. It's not a major pipeline. It's the pipeline.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Rising demand for lithium is stoking prices for the electric vehicle battery metal, fueling long-delayed expansions that still may not produce adequate supplies that automakers need to meet aggressive production plans. Growing industry optimism from higher lithium prices is a change from last year when funding for mines and processing plants dried up during the pandemic. Albemarle Corp, Livent Corp and other producers are scrambling to make more lithium, but some analysts worry the recent price jump will not spur a big enough expansion to meet a planned wave of new EV models by mid-decade.
Indian Oil Minister Dharmendra Pradhan on Friday thanked Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern oil producers for supplying liquid medical oxygen, LMO, to help the country in its battle with the COVID-19 crisis. In a series of tweets, Pradhan also welcomed offers by Saudi Arabia, UAE and Qatar to supply containers for the next 6 months and for an assurance of a steady commercial supply of LMO to India. Deeply appreciate the initial gesture of goodwill with complementary LMO supplies particularly from UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, Pradhan said. Next, we have the top news in metal market, with copper prices on the London Metal Exchange at record highs above $10,000 per ton. Key Chinese buyers who had been holding off purchases in the hope of a pullback now face the prospect of higher for longer copper costs. Prices in London hit an all-time $10,253 a ton on Friday, and are up 32% year-to-date. Most active Shanghai June copper futures touched 74,950 yuan a ton, only 1.6% below their all-time high of $76,160 yuan. Some Chinese buyers, including wire and rod suppliers to China's state grid, a massive copper consumer, have held off buying as they are unable to pass on all higher costs to the state-run firm, which is restricted by a fixed budget.
Indonesia's refined tin exports in April were 7,007.29 tons, up 66% compared to the same month last year, data from the country's trade ministry showed on Friday. On a monthly basis, tin shipment from Indonesia rose 16%, the data showed.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
China's 2021 corn output is forecast to rise 4.3% from the previous year to 272 million tons, a government think tank said on Friday, in the first estimate by an official agency for the crop to be harvested later this year. Corn acreage in 2021 is expected to increase 3.3% from the previous year to 42.63 million hectares, China National Grain and Oils Information Center also said in a statement published on its official WeChat account. The estimates come after China's domestic corn prices hit record highs amid tighter supplies of the grain. That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.